Okay, so again, we're just gonna start from the very beginning. How to make a file, and I've seen a couple people have problems with it during the tech check. So to make a new file, new. Oh, sorry, I'm in QuickTime. File, new, right, and it gives you this window here. So remember, we asked you to do the was it a 8 by 10, 10 by 8? Doesn't matter now. Let's say we just want to make a 10 inches wide and 8 inches tall file. And what some of you did is put 300 pixels per centimeter and not per inch. Now, when I put 300 pixels per centimeter, centimeter is 2.2 times smaller than an inch, right? So that means there is 2.2 times more pixels are going to be in an inch. So if I actually switch it to pixels per inch right now, it's gonna, no, it's not giving me the math. It's supposed to. Other versions of Photoshop actually give you the math, which comes out to like 700 and something DPI. So when you set your resolution to 300 pixels per centimeter, you actually, when you switch it to inches, it would actually be something like 723, I think, around there. So make sure you pay attention to where, what your resolution is. It's per inch or per centimeter. Most of the time you are going to be working with DPI, which is dots per inch, right? So not per centimeter. So let's say it's 300. Color modes, RGB, CMYK, so on. Most of the time we're going to be working with RGB, CMYK if you're working for print. And you really, like 8 bits is probably enough for, for your purposes so far. You can work in 16-bit just to kind of get smoother gradients and stuff like that. 32-bit if you're doing HDR, super high quality photos. But keep in mind that the file size will get progressively bigger, right? So right now estimated file size is 82 megabytes. If you switch to 16, it's going to be half of that and then half of that again, right? So your files could get pretty huge. Anyways, so you can name it if you want right away. You can name it when you're saving, doesn't matter. Tutorial. We're not really going to do anything with this file. So you made a canvas. You can float it in your Photoshop kind of workspace. If you just click and drag it away, you can actually make it a window that you can minimize, and then you can grab it and bring it back here. It's all of the controls for those windows are here in workspace. Sorry, arrange, and you can just float all in windows, float all, cascade, tile, and so on. Right. So what I usually do is just do float all in windows, and that way I can have. I don't really like that tab interface that you have right here, right? So you can switch between the tabs if you make another file. I kind of like having them side by side in separate windows. It's up to you, whichever way you like to work. Anyways, another way to start working in Photoshop is to just drag the file in there, and this is what we're gonna do. So what we will do is go into the where is that folder? Into the tutorial assets folder, and I'll grab my backdrop and background crackles, and I'll just click and drag them right into the workspace. Now if you have it in windowed mode, you can just kind of drop it in that darker gray area, like almost black area, and it will open in new windows. Yeah, you can use the embedded profile. Okay. Again, okay. Alright. And then it will open, and again it does it in tabs, which I don't like. And look what happens. I'm just going to show you a quick difference here. If you have it in the tab mode and you try to drop another file into there. Oh my god, that's the wrong thing. There it is. And if you're trying to drop the other file into the tab mode, what it's going to do is going to paste it over top of your image in the open tab. Right? So just beware of that. If you want images open in separate files, then you would have to either be in the window mode and then you can drop them right down into the middle of the workspace, or you would just have to, if you're in this tab view mode, what you can do if you want images. Oh my god, where is it? I hate Macs so much. Alright, if you don't want it to open in the same image, if you want it to open in a different file, what you have to do is actually drag it into that little tab area right there, and then it will open in a different file. Alright. And again, I'm not going to be working with those. I'm just going to float everything in Windows again. So float all in Windows, arrange, float all in Windows. And now I have them as separate images that I can flip around and work with. Alright, I don't really need this tutorial document. It was just to show you, right, how to set it up. So I'm going to close it. And what we're going to do is take this wall here and use a bunch of things to add this cracking pattern to the wall. And what we can do first is obviously go into this crackles picture. To select all, I want the entire picture. I can just press Command A. Right, so Command A selects all, Command D selects nothing. So it's kind of like all or deselect, if you want to remember. Just a little sidebar, I am all about the shortcuts, the keyboard shortcuts. If you work a lot with software, you do not want to spend time looking at all those menus. It just wastes so much time. So try to remember the shortcuts. I will definitely try to say what I'm pressing, but sometimes I might not. Please feel free to stop me and say, hey, how did you do this? Because my hands are a lot of the times ahead of my brain, sort of. Alright, so Command A, select all, Command C to copy, that's standard Windows shortcuts. Command V to paste in the new document now, once we switch to Windows. And it's right there. Alright, there's our texture. Now, obviously, I'm going to just minimize this window, and this is our backdrop window. So we can see that you can turn the layer on and off, right, the visibility, you all know that, the little eye icon. And what's happening right now is the crackles are completely covering the bricks, and I kind of want to add the cracks to the bricks, is what I'm trying to do here. So you could do it with opacity, but it doesn't look good, does it? It kind of looks faded, and you can sort of tell that it is being done with opacity. So another way to blend these layers together is to actually use the blending modes, which are right here. So once you select the layer, you can click on that little bar that says normal, and that is the normal blending mode. And the normal blending mode means that it's basically you're going to see every pixel that is on top. Right? So right now this entire image takes up the top layer, and it is full of pixels. There's no transparency pixels in them, so it's completely blocking the backdrop. Right? There is absolutely no transparency in it. What you can do is actually you can just kind of run through those by okay, in Windows you can run through those by pressing the arrow keys. On a Mac you can't, so you have to manually select them like that and see what happens with each one. And you can kind of already see that, you know, linear burn is giving us a kind of a cool effect, but it's really dark. What we want to try for this one is color burn. So let's go into color burn, and it's, you know, you can see that it's slightly brighter than linear burn. So it's giving us, we're not really seeing all of the crackles, some of them disappear, and it's kind of getting really yellow, but this is a good starting point. And what we can do next is actually control the way this blending mode, the layer is blending with the previous one. So if you just double click it, never mind, apparently you can't do that on a Mac either. Just click on the little effects icon at the bottom here, and that is your special effects for the layer, right? So the little effects button at the bottom, and you can go into blending options. at the very top. Right. And this is the effects is where all of your kind of drop shadow is, right? You have your stroke. If you want to add a stroke to an object, you can add a texture, you can add glow. All those kind of bevel and emboss is one that people like to go crazy with, especially with text. Don't do that. What we want right now, though, is this blending options, right? And what we can do here is actually manipulate the amount of blending that happens depending on the value of the pixels. And this is, again, as same as processing 0 to 255, which reminds me. Okay, I have to correct myself. When we were doing tech checks, I told a couple of you guys, when we were talking about the histogram, that when you hit the top, you clipped. That is not true. I have to correct myself. What I was thinking of was the RGB parade. I'm going to bring it up here quickly. Hold on. So, in video editing, there's a thing called RGB parade. And, yeah, that's basically it right here. And what this does is actually shows you the entire frame of the image. So, this right here, one channel, is one frame. So from this we can tell that, you know, it's slightly kind of warmer reddish tone overall, and then there's probably a subject right here in the middle that is being lit up, right? You can tell that it's there's a spike right here in the middle of the frame, and that subject is, again, more so reddish in color, so really warm. So it's probably like a warm spot on him or something. So in here, bottom 0 is full black and top is full white. On your histogram in the camera, or also in Photoshop if you're going to levels, what you see is the scale from, so left, full left is complete black and full right is complete white, 0 to 255. So once you actually hit the sides, then you've clipped. So if you see a spike in the left side, that means you crushed your blacks. If you see a spike in the right side hitting the very edge, that means you've blown your highlights. And how tall it is, it just shows you the amount of pixels of that value in the image. So they all could be in somewhere in the middle. That just means you know, your picture it does not have a very high dynamic range. They're all kind of the same value, so it's probably not a very contrasty picture. It's just, they're just going to be all kind of middle gray, right? Not actual middle gray with the value. I can show it to you also when we go into layers. But anyways, so that's the difference, right? Back to this. In the layer style, what you can do now is change the amount of pixels it takes into consideration when it blends those things together. And what we can do is just take this 255 slider, the white slider, in this layer and move it over this way until we start seeing, yeah, if you move it, like, you know, dramatically over to the left, you'll see that most of the image has returned back to white color. That's because it's not blending that yellow from the previous picture anymore, but all the crackles are starting to go away too. So we're kind of gonna find a somewhat balance here between them. I'll probably leave it around 125 for now. I can always adjust it later. And it's starting to look a lot better. It's still a bit grimy, but it kind of works for the image, really. I sort of like it that way. And I canceled it. Give me 1 second. 125-ish. Yeah, it's good enough. Alright, so okay. Now it's staying that way. And what I can do now is also apply an adjustment layer to it to kind of fix the contrast so that there is more difference between those black lines and the white space that I kind of wanted gone, and so we don't have all that dirt. And to fix the contrast, all I have to do is go into curves. So do not actually use the brightness and contrast, which one is it? I don't even know because I don't use it. It's somewhere in here. Don't use it. Use curves. Curves is your best friend. And we're going to be working with all of the channels here, RGB altogether. That's what kind of controls the general darkness, right, or brightness all together. But what we can also do with curves is, let me just reset it for a second. Okay, default. Oh yeah, and there's also all these presets, by the way. You can, select those and it will already give you strong contrast right there. But we want to do it manually for the sake of learning. So what I'm going to do is put a point in the highlights right there, put a point in the shadows over here, and now I just drag it down slightly in the shadows and drag it up slightly in the highlights, kind of increasing the amount it should take in there. There we go. And what you notice right now is that I'm changing the entire picture. You notice that the bricks got brighter. So in order to avoid that, all I have to do is just click this little icon here, and that will lock it to the layer that's directly below this adjustment layer. Alright, so if you click that, now you see that I'm only changing the input of the layer 1, which is my crackles, and my bricks are staying the same color. And this is what I want to do. And you can see that when I'm moving my slider here, all that brown stuff starts to go away because I'm washing it out with white, and the blending options that I have set are not taken in the white information. They're skipping it, so only the blacker pixels come through to this image. So I'm just gonna take that out, maybe to that's a bit extreme there, maybe to this point here. And I can also go back and adjust my blending mode now, right? So double click on this. Oh yeah, okay, double clicking works, never mind. You just have to click on the actual image. So if you double click on the actual image, your layer style will come up, which is where your blending options are. Right, so if you double click on the icon right there. And what I can do here again is just see if I can adjust it a bit more. And that's starting to look a bit crazy. That's not bad. It's the cracks are looking a bit too dark now, so I might even go back into curves and bump that down a little bit. And here is what I've seen a lot of you do that you should not do. So when you're working with adjustment layers, the good thing about them is, well, all you have to do in order to change whatever you did before is click on the little adjustment icon here of that layer, and you'll be back to your adjustment, and you can just fix it and leave it. Now what I saw a lot of you doing is clicking this icon again and adding a new layer, and then adding exposure and adding more curves and more exposure and more curves, and you have 5,000 of those layers. Some of them are blank, but some of them were actually fighting each other, so you had your kind of brightness bumped up in this one, and then you had your exposure, you tried to bump it down. So all of those things degrade the image, right? It just starts looking worse and worse. So whoever had this, and you probably remember I told a couple of you guys you have a bunch of adjustment layers there, you do not need those. Especially if they're all the same and they're all kind of affecting the general area, or all affecting one layer when it could be done in one. So do not click on those icons again to go back into the adjustment layer that you already made. That is to create a new one. So only click on those if you need a new one. All you have to do to go back to the one you already have is click on this little thing, and your adjustment will come up. All right. And yeah, so that's looking pretty good. Now, the other thing you can do is, again, I kind of like the grimy look of this. It's, I like those little specks. But if you want to get rid of those, what you can do without actually destroying the image, right? So you could just go into the layer, take the eraser, bump up the, so eraser is E. I can change the size of the brush by pressing the square bracket thingies. Square brackets. They're right beside P. to the right of the P. You can press those. That will change the brush size of whatever tool you have, be it your brush, your eraser, clone stamp as well. All of those things. You can change the size of your brush with brackets. All right, really convenient. And you can just erase that, right? But now you've actually erased the image. If I take that away, what's happening is you can see that there is no image there left, right? It's gone. And you know, you could do this if you're sure of your actions and you know that you're not going to go back to it. Let me see. Okay, there we go. Also, the other thing I'm doing here that you didn't see, so if you want to undo something, it's Command Z, right? But what happens with Command Z, let me just show you a better version here. I'm going to grab an eraser, I'm going to put a big line through the middle so you can see, and then I'm going to put another big line right here. Right, so I erase this part, I erase this part. What happens with Command Z, I can undo erasing the bottom, but if I press it again, I'm undoing the undo. So you can only go back one step with Command Z. And it's really useless except for a couple purposes. I'll show you those later in a second. To backstep more than once, you're going to use Command Option Z, and that can give you more steps. Command Shift Z will move it forward. Command Option Z will move it back. All right. Now, Command Z is useful when you are, let's say, in a free transform. So I'm going to go into free transform. And, you know, let's say you scale this image properly to the way you want it to be, right? And you spend a long time adjusting it, and then you accidentally distorted it. So Command Alt Z is not going to help you in this case because you have not finished the action and it actually hasn't dropped into your history yet. So whenever you're backstepping in Command Alt Z, all you're doing is going back in history, and you can achieve the same thing, you know, without the shortcut, without the keyboard shortcut, just by clicking on history, and that will take you back to the same step. So what you can do here, though, is press Command Z, and that gives you that one step to undo. So if you're doing free transform, or if you're doing color range, when you also have to select something and then press OK to apply it, you get this one free step. So if you messed up once, you can always undo it and go back to where you were. It works in something else too. I forget, color range, any action that you know you have to apply to press OK for it to drop into the history here. You can use Command Z to undo it once. And it's also useful for kind of comparing the two different versions, right? Like, let's say I have my, I don't know, like I erased this part because I didn't like it, so I can just kind of quickly scroll through those and compare which one I like better. That's really all I use it for. Otherwise, Command Alt Z, use that. What was I at? Yes. So instead of erasing things in Photoshop, what you can do is apply masks, right? And to make a new mask on a layer, you can press the mask icon, so it's right beside the effects and the adjustment layer, add layer mask. So you have to be on the right layer for that, remember? So click on the right layer, go into the layer mask, and there it is. Right now it's full white, which means the entire the entire area, the entire canvas of that layer is being taken into consideration. So it's passing through the mask. In order for it to not pass through the mask, you would take your, one way to do it is just take the brush, switch it to black, and start painting on the mask. Now make sure you're on the mask, not on the layer itself. So right now I'm on the layer, and now I'm on the mask. And why am I not painting on the mask? Oh, I'm in the eraser, that's why. I was in the eraser. So if you switch to the brush and paint on the mask, what you will do is effectively erase those areas. My brush is slightly weird. I'm just gonna make it hard if I can. There we go. So this is kind of the same as erasing, except you're not really erasing, you are making it just disappear with the mask here. And the good thing about it is that once you erase, it's gone. Once you've covered it with the black here, what you can do is also change the opacity, and it will... how come it's not coming back? Oh, okay. Yeah, you can't do that with black. I forgot. You have to be in gray in order to change opacity. But anyways, if you color it in gray, you can change the opacity and it will kind of slowly come back to you. So, oh wait, no, I was on the wrong thing. Never mind, you can change opacity. No, you can't. Alright. Let's move on. So, color it black on the mask level, on the mask for editing, and if you want all those areas gone, all you have to do is just kind of color them in, and ta-da, they're gone, and you can have those cracks or whatnot just being in the image. So it could take a bit of work, but in the end, you have a nice crack thing. I'm not going to finish it, obviously, but that was a project I did last year for State of Mind, which was a production by Fourth Years. I did this wall for them. I don't know if you guys saw the play, but you might be familiar with it. Anyways, this is the basics, right? All you need to know to kind of use your tools properly. So remember, do not use multiple layers, use curves instead of hue saturation, use curves instead of, sorry, not hue saturation, instead of white balance, use curves instead of exposure and like brightness, contrast, and so on. What we are gonna do now is, oh yeah, before we move on to the color correction, before I let you guys play around with it, another thing I wanted to show you quickly is the same thing with the masks. So we're gonna grab these two HDR1 and 2 files and just move it over into the area here, and again I'm gonna float them in Windows. What I have here is a horribly, I can close the wall file, I don't need it anymore. Cancel, don't save. So what we have is one kind of horribly underexposed foreground picture, right? And one horribly overexposed background, but foreground looks nice. And HDR in the camera, what we will do is combine it for you automatically. You can also do it in Photoshop now. All you have to do is just go like File, Automate, Merge to HDR. And you select the files, and it takes those, merges them together. You have a bunch of options there. There is a lot of tutorials online on how to do that. So if you're interested in that, go online, look at them. I'm not just going to regurgitate what they teach. However, this is the easiest way of doing HDR, and it's kind of, you know, default way, I guess. Before there was all that automation. What I'm going to do here is take this overexposed image, Command A to select all, Command C to copy again, Command V to paste it over the underexposed one, and I'm gonna apply a mask to it. So take the mask, there it is, so we know how to do that now. G is your gradient or paint bucket, and right now I'm at gradient, so I'm going to switch to paint bucket tool, and I'm just going to fill the entire mask black so we don't see it anymore. And I can go either into the brush now and switch it to white. Right here there's a little arrow to switch your palettes. So this is your foreground color, this is your background color, right? Kind of stroke and fill. Not really, but you know what I mean. And one of the easiest way is just do this. Well, I mean, you would be more precise, but this is how it works. And what you can do is do that, right? Ta-da! She's kind of in there. And she might look a little bit overexposed for the shot, but we can fix that. You can also play around with blending modes too. I think overlay could actually work pretty good here, or color, linear color. But you know, I'm not gonna be precise here. This is just an example. But there's our HDR photo. She looks really kind of photoshopped in, to say the least. You can knock down the opacity right there. So what I mentioned before, right? You can't knock down the opacity of the black, but you can of grays and whites. Whatever is not fully black, you can always change it, right? And now it's kind of looking more like she could actually be in the scene there. So it's you know, it's basically the same as copying and pasting her from the other side, except you're not gonna get the rough edges. You can also use, you know, whatever tool you want to use to color that area in. You can use your quick selection mask, you can use your lasso with a feather, magic wand, whatever you want. You can work with masks the same way you work with images, right? So super easy, super simple, and doesn't take long, and it's kind of quick fix. And especially works if you don't have images that are entirely matching. Like here, the trees move a bit. You can't see because the mask is there. But if I turn the mask off, oh yeah, you can disable the mask by right-clicking it and then disable layer mask, and it goes away. But you can see that there is movement in the trees. There is movement in her shirt. It's actually pretty decent for being like a portrait. But anyways, that's a really low-tech way of doing it. And if you want the high-tech ways, plenty of tutorials online. So it's all up to you. But then again, cameras do it for you now, so really it's kind of become redundant. Because you can just set your camera to HDR and it will do a better job at it than Photoshop. So what we can do now is take, oh sorry, that's the tutorial notes that you don't need. You can go back into the assets, and there's one more thing I can show you guys, is take those color 1 and color 2 things and bring them into Photoshop, and we can use the embedded profile, I guess. There it is. I'm gonna float them again in Windows. Okay, and what we see here is two horribly exposed shots, color balance wise. I have no idea how they produced that green one. It's some kind of magic. But yeah, the blue one is a typical, if you shot outside with tungsten setting, right, and it's broad daylight and it's just everything is white and already kind of bluish, and then the camera adds more blue to it. This is a quite realistic wrong color balance for a daylight shot if you set it to tungsten on your camera. You know, and sometimes it happens you don't notice on your camera. Like I rented out one of those NX5Us and somebody set it to 1080p 60i, so it was 60 frames per second interlaced, and I set my shutter to 48 because I didn't notice it was 60 frames per second, and it just ended up looking horrible. And you know, basically I salvaged the footage, but it didn't look good. Here again, same thing can happen, right? You can have let me stop the recording for a second actually, because this is where you guys come in. Is it working? Okay, so we're going. So these two horrible images, obviously extremes, but what I'm going to show you is that even from these you can kind of get a decent result. And this is just going to be the first pass, so-called, right? So it's just, we're looking for general kind of white being white, black being black, blue being blue, and so on. So what I'm going to use for this is curves. And curves, again, as I mentioned before, is your best friend. The image is not exposed, like underexposed or I think it's normal exposure, and we can actually see it by the histogram. It's not like bad, right? It's not touching the sides. So I'm gonna leave the RGB channel alone for now, right? So RGB all together make white, red, green, blue together combined make white to black. So I'm gonna switch to individual channels here and control them. And what I see is that image is really green. So I'm gonna go into the green channel, grab the middle, and I'm not gonna make 2 points like I did before for contrast. I'm just kind of changing the values altogether. I don't need the difference between darks and lights. I'm just gonna grab right down in the middle and pull it down, maybe to here. That's good enough for now. I'm gonna go into the red and make my reds look red. That's looking decent so far. And I'm just gonna go into the blue and adjust it so that that backboard and the jersey that I see, I know they're white, and I also know that my blues should be blue. So I'm just gonna adjust that until I see that it's looking somewhat decent. That's it. 3 clicks. Now it's become slightly oversaturated, right? Because I kind of bumped up those blues and those reds. They're really saturated. So you can go into hue saturation now and actually bump it down just a bit, like maybe -9, -10. It's getting there. It's taken away quite a bit of the red, so maybe I'm not gonna go that far. -5 is fine. The top here, you know what? It might have been actually that color because my whites are pretty white, right? Like the ice is looking normal. There is absolutely no, my God, what's it called? Color noise, right? Any other color presence in the blacks. There is slightly purple. You can't see it on this screen here, but I can see it on my good screen. That the gloves and the shorts and the skates right here are looking slightly purple. But given the general look of the image overall, I would say that it is a really closely, properly balanced. And then if there's any other problem areas, I would just go and fix those with masks, right? Applying different layers, making layers over top of that to fix certain areas. So that was really it, right? In your curves, you would pull down the channel that you don't like. You would pull up something else that you have reference to, like I know that was red. So we're going to do the same thing here now, right? So we have this image here. And again, this one I found a bit more challenging. So curves again. I'm going to switch to blue for now. And in this one, we'll actually have to pull down the RGB channel together to reduce brightness. And you can see that RGB, we clipped right here, right? Remember I said that if you hit the right side or the left side, you clipped. So it's the same thing here. You clip that right there. There's a spike. You can see right there. That's quite a few pixels that are full white. What am I doing? I'm going into the blue channel. I'm gonna pull that down till about here maybe for now. I'm gonna go into the red channel again and bring that up until that red stop sign is looking somewhat decent. And I'm gonna go into the green channel and pull that up as well. Or down. No, up. Never mind. Until we start seeing a decent exposure. Now, I kind of made it very blue. So let me go back into the blue here and fix that a bit. And what I want to do now is, I can't really tell the actual colors because it's overexposed and everything is washed out. So I'm just going to go and fix the general curves down to this exposure. And it looks way different on that screen than it is on mine. So for that screen, I'm gonna bump this again. There we go. Looking better. And reds, we want them up. Yeah, so this one is slightly more of a pain. But that's really about it. And yeah, you get that weird purple on the mic. You get those artifacts on the grass, but I think that's because that grass was blown out in the original image. I can't tell if it was. The histogram doesn't tell you where those pixels are, unlike the RGB parade, right? But I'm assuming that those specks there were blown out. But just, you know, comparison of what we started with and what we ended up with, right? You can work with that. You can do some more adjustments to it and it will look better. And this is obviously, I wouldn't know that that was so badly exposed if I just looked at it, right? So this is a really good fix. This is a really good start, and then you can kind of keep going with the areas for improvement there. There is a way to cheat this as well, and I can show you how. I found that a couple maybe last year actually, how to cheat color balance. So if you don't, if you can't do that manually with curves, what you can do is, let me actually show it on this one because it will look somewhat the same. So we'll remember this, right? I'm gonna turn these off for now, and I'll keep those just in case. What I want to do is create a new layer, and you can actually go ahead with me if you guys want to try that. So Command Shift N is the new layer altogether, or you can go File, New, or no, sorry, Layer, maybe Layer, New Layer. Command Shift N is your new layer, and yeah, just click OK. Layer 1, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. And I'm gonna fill it full gray. So if you press Shift Delete together, you'll get your fill dialog, and in your contents, instead of foreground color, go 50% gray. Alright, and press OK. Now it's a full gray layer, and what we want to do is now change the blending mode to I can't remember, oh my god, hold on, I think it's difference. Change it to difference. Yeah, that's it. And it looks really weird, and that's what we want. What we want to do next is make a new adjustment layer for threshold, and it's going to turn black. It should turn black for you. And there's a little slider here, so you can slide that slider and you can start seeing that, you know, things start going away and appearing again, and it's all going to be black and white. So you would want to kind of slide it all the way to the left until you have no blacks, and then start bringing them up until you start seeing kind of a little bit of it. Like this is pretty decent right here at 41 for me. So maybe bring it to around 41 threshold level. All right. And what we want to do next is zoom in to this black area. So I'm just gonna command plus it in. If you want to, you can press the Z for zoom tool, and you can just click and drag to zoom, right? Or command plus, and take your eyedropper tool for eye, and instead of sampling a color, we will just make a little mark. So if you hold down Shift, you can mark the spot, and it will make a little mark with a number 1 beside it. All right, with eyedropper. So I for eyedropper, and Shift click, make a little mark. Gonna zoom back out, and now we're gonna make a curves level. So same as we did before, which is curves right here. So there's the curves layer, and what we have these tools on the side here, right, is obviously our line manipulation tool where we can make the curves ourselves, and then there's also sample points for black, for white, gray, and black. I believe, yeah, this is for the black point, gray point, and white point. And what we want to do now is grab the gray point, and you can actually turn off the threshold layer, so we don't see it anymore, and the layer 1 as well, so because we already have the mark here. So we're just left with the background and curves layer right now. I'm gonna zoom back into that point where I selected, and what I'm gonna do now is just grab the gray sample point and click, and what it does, it automatically calculates the curves for me. Now, this is obviously looking slightly worse than what I had before, right? Because you let the computer do it for you, and you didn't do it with your own eye. But this is a good start, right? If you don't know where to start, you can just do it here from this point. You can see that the ice is looking slightly more blue than I had it. And it's still oversaturated, so maybe we'll bring the saturation back there. And if I switch between these two, you can tell that the one that you made yourself is slightly better, right? There is no blue in that ice. If I go back to this one, yeah, so you can tell that this one is a bit off still. That's because you let the computer do it for you. So remember, your eye is your best tool, and that's why you really have to, start kind of training and seeing color. And I mean, if you're not going into color correction, it probably doesn't matter that much. But once you actually start seeing color, like it's that white and gold dress all over again, right? That was crazy. But when I looked at that dress, and having worked with color for over 2 years before, like actually color grading, I knew that I said, yeah, okay, it is a blue and black dress, and it's done in a horribly yellow light, so that's why you're seeing it. So you can actually start once you know the context that the photo was shot in, you can kind of try to make the corrections in your brain to to let your eye see what you want to see. And same here. So if you know that your green is too high in this one, sorry, the blue, I mean, then you can kind of bring that down in the blue curve, and now our green is going crazy. So, but now it's messing up the entire thing for us. So anyways, this is the shot that we ended up with when we did it manually. This is what we ended up with when we did it, when we let the computer do it. Neither of those are horrible. Let me pause the recording again just for a second. Out. So we're back to recording, yeah. And this free transform thing is all I wanted to show real quick. Be sure to use the embedded. Alright, so there's a guy jumping, and it's a rasterized image, right? So what happens with the rasterized image is when you free transform it, and I've seen a couple of you do it with the dog, and this is what you shouldn't do. So you kind of made the dog really small. Well, we're going to make the guy, in this case, really small now. There he is, tiny guy. So what happens here is, when it's a rasterized image, you resampled it to be tiny, right? And if you go ahead and decide to make him big again, can you guess what happens?
It gets pixelated.
Yay! And obviously that's not going to be the final result because it's going to resample it again, but the resampled result, yeah, will look like that, which is still horrible. So, if you know that you're not going to rescale something, and you have a copy of your, like right now I do have the guy, so if I'm going to step back, like what I can do is just make a copy of the guy, and he's there, and it's a PNG basically, right? It's just him. So now I can destroy this dude, whatever. I have a backup copy of it if I need it. It's fine. Another way to do it, though, if you don't want to make backup copies, if you don't want to make thousands of backup copies, and you don't want to destroy the image, is convert it to a smart object. So right-click on the layer itself, and then go convert to smart object. And what that will do is it will make it not destroy itself, to begin with, right? It's gonna be normal, but you can't directly edit. So let's say if I wanted to erase his head, I click eraser, and I click on him. It says this smart object must be rasterized before editing. So a lot of you click OK usually and just erase it. But what you can actually do is instead of rasterizing the smart object, you can kind of, it's the same as nesting in Premiere, which we'll discuss later, but you can kind of edit it as a separate file that is nested into this Photoshop file. So if you double click on the smart object that you have, it goes after editing the contents, choose file to submit, blah blah blah. We'll hit OK. Again, we'll use the embedded profile. And here we're working with the jump.psd guy, and it's a rasterized image, so we can erase his head, right? And once we save it, press Command S and go back into our normal file, we can see that it's gone. All right. So that's a way to. It is a good practice to not destroy things as you're going along, or at least make backup copies. But if you're working with smart objects, all you have to do is really double click on it, and then you can edit it in a separate file. And then once you've made the changes in that one, all you have to do is just have to save those changes, and it's going to be. I didn't save, I guess. You have to save those changes, and it's going to be brought into the. Why is it not being brought into here now? Hold on. Oh, that's because that is the old file. So I would have to reopen it now and do this all over again. And now I can, yeah, there. Save the changes, and it will be brought into here. All right. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Stop recording. See you guys later. Thanks for being here, I guess. Where is the QuickTime, stupid thing? Stop.